So hopefully you can see a big need for looping in your programs because you don't want to do things over and over again. Having to write the same piece of code twice is a real big pain, especially when you need to modify that piece of code. Now you've got to do it twice. So looping is obviously really important. But looping with lists is very important as well. So far in our programs, we've created our lists inside of the program. We have, gone in and, said my list with values, and that's great, but usually we don't get our lists from inside our program. Usually we don't know what the list needs to be. We get our lists elsewhere, like the user provides it, or we were able to get it from something on the internet, or it's from a file. Lists come from all sorts of places besides the ones that we create inside of our own programs. So it's really important to be able to loop over those lists. So first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you can loop over a list. So for example, I'm not going to give you a list. We're not going to get a list from anywhere else. We're still going to use the lists that we create in our own programs. But I'm going to show you how you can iterate over the items in the list. So it's a pretty simple syntax. It reads really well. So all you do is you say for item in my list, and then we can print the item. And so item here is a variable. So we're creating a variable. Every time we iterate, it will populate this variable with the next item in my list. So you can see when we print out item, I couldn't say print out blah because blah isn't defined, but item is defined right here. And then my list is obviously this list. So the keywords here are for and in. So we're going to do a for loop for every item in my list. And then again, we've got that colon at the end, and we're going to print it out. So let's try running that. Let's see. So it's going to do 1, 2, 3. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So it's pretty simple to do that. Sometimes though, so item is the actual item in the list, but sometimes we want to know, like we did before, we want to know what the index is. And so there's this enumerate function that we can use, and now we can print out item and I, and that's going to do the items 0, 1, 2, and then I did that wrong. So this is actually I, and that is item. So now that should be what we want. So the items 1, 2, and 3 are on this left column, and then 0, 1, 2 are the indexes on the right column. So that's really handy. So enumerate is a really important function that you should remember because you'll use it a lot to get the index. Another thing that you might want to do is to loop over dictionaries. So let's say that this were a dictionary, and we've got my favorite dictionary here. So if we wanted to loop over the dictionary, then this is possible as well. So now we just have a key. And let's see what happens when we do that. And I gotta call it the right thing. So 3, 2, 1. And you're like, whoa, why did it do 3, 2, 1? And the reason why is because dictionaries actually sort their items. Well, they don't sort their items. So the items that are held in a dictionary are actually, there's a really efficient operation that dictionaries use internally to find the items that it needs to. And so it's sorted in a completely random way, and there's an actual algorithm, so I shouldn't say random, but it's random to you. You have no idea how it's going to do that. And so you can't rely on a dictionary to have the items sorted in the way that you would think. So that's just something that you need to remember. So if you need it to be sorted, then you're going to have to pull the items out and then sort them and put them in a list, because lists are sorted, dictionaries are not. So if you wanted to get the key and the value though, so you can let's say that you wanted the value, you wanted to print out the value of everything and not the key. Well, there you go. So you can get the key and then reference in the dictionary with the key to get the value. If you wanted to get the key and the value and not have to do that, you can do iter items and then we're going to get the key and the value. And there we go, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. So we were able to print out the key and the value by doing that iter items. Finally, there's this thing that is really handy. You'll see it all the time, and it allows you to do something like print out a tic-tac-toe board. And so let's try, I'm just going to try, I've got a little code snippet that I'm going to use. Oops. So it looks like it's really complaining at me. So let's do this. So I hope that is right. So here we've done a function. Don't worry about functions. You're going to learn about them later if you haven't already. So but basically it's just this thing that I'm going to be able to call multiple times here, and you've used them all the time. So just barely when we had that for loop. And when this was a list, so here's iter items, that's a function. Also when it was a list and we had my list, then we had this enumerate function. So you've already seen functions, so don't be scared by that. So you'll learn about them more later. But we've got this list, and it's a list, and the elements in the list are lists. So we've got what's called a two-dimensional array, or a two-dimensional list. So that's what my list is here. Then, excuse me. So we have my list, and then we're going to print it out. And then I'm going to change an element in the list, like we're playing tic-tac-toe, and then I'm going to print it out again. So let me just do this, and then we'll look at it again. So I should probably, as I do that, just print here to get an extra space. So here's our game board, our first game board. This is when it's blank, and then this is when we put an X in the middle. And so let's go through what this does. And so you can just ignore this function thing right here. This is the part. We could have done this. You know, we could have put the loop down here twice, but that's the beauty of functions that you'll learn about if you haven't already. So we first go through list. That's what L is. L is list, and I is item. And then we want to, since I is one of these, it's a whole list. Since I is one of those, we want to loop around every item in that list. So we're looping twice. And so I'm just going to walk through this once. And so let's say that the first time that we do this, we have this first list. So that's what I is. Then J is going to be the first item in that. And we're going to print it out. And then I put this comma here. In Python, by putting a comma there, it doesn't put a new line. When I don't put a comma, it does a new line. So it's going to print out J, which is this one. Then it's going to put a space. And then it's going to come around again, and J is going to be the next item in the list, which is this second one, and it's going to print it out and put a space. Then J is going to be this item, and it's going to print it out, put a space. Then it's done with this for loop, and it's going to do a print, and since there's no comma, it's going to do a new line. That's why over here we had 1, 2, 3, new line. The second iteration, the I is this list, and we're able to see that it prints out 1, 2, 3, and then new line. Then I is this one, 1, 2, 3, new line, and we're done. And so, excuse me again. So that's basically a 2D array. You use these all the time because whenever you have items that you want to go, I mean, that's why it's called a two-dimensional arrays, because you have, instead of just printing things out on one dimension, we're printing them out on this dimension and down this way. So we're going left to right and top to bottom. And so that's what you can do with two-dimensional arrays. And so it's really handy. It's something that you're going to need. There's a homework in this lesson that requires you to use it as well.